that's interesting that you mentioned hospitality startups. Like 90% of all restaurants that have ever been made like fail, uh, like pretty spectacularly too, as far as I know.
Yeah. I figured, artists and restaurants have about the same track record, I think. So I picked some good industries.
Yeah, having worked at a restaurant, especially like having seen how they function like that, why would you do that willingly? I don't understand.
Yeah, that's a good question. It was, you get crippling debt from law school, and then you figure out the worst way to pay it back. No, I like building things, building places. It was kind of the craft beer heyday back where, like, where I was, there just wasn't that many options for, uh, good good beverages, and there's kind of a creativity to that too, and kind of building spaces that people can, cool meeting spaces people can come together in. So in theory, it's really cool, and I really like, creating, developing and creating spaces, and then found out, after years, I really hated, like, once you get something up and running, it's really just a grind about efficiency and trying to get your 2.5% profit to, 3.5, and that's just spreadsheets and HR, and not anything that I'm good at or like.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, because when you said you were, I mean, it's one thing to like start a restaurant, but you said you had multiple of these like startups, as you said. Is
Yeah.
that like that is having worked at both? That is actually kind of, I mean, they're basically the same thing, except just working with something like the idea is already there. The product is already there. Now it's just a matter of like, okay, how do we get this to the customer in the most efficient way possible, and then also keep the lights on.
Right. And I think, the alcohol industry generally, for good or bad, I think the, branding, marketing, I mean, some of it, you know, art on cans or whatever, there's a baseline of quality where you need to be to survive. Like, your product has to be good. But once it's on a shelf somewhere, the difference between, four different good IPAs for a lot of people is how they interact with the visuals. So there is, I mean, it's almost there is kind of an art mechanic to it, because people will, go down the shelf, and it needs to be great so they come back and get it again. But that first time, a lot of it is all based on, the feeling they have by looking at it in a sea of other, you know, colors. So
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I've every now and then when I go get beer, I just see this like and wide isn't even like the right word for it, but it's just like infinitely expanding selection of like all these different craft beers and IPAs, and they have all these like weird names and weird flavors. And I'm just like, man,
yeah,
I get it. Everyone tried to like cash in on the idea. Now like there's a boom in the industry, but it's just so
right.
confusing browsing like this beer. It's like in the same way that I put it in the same category as like wine sommeliers that say like, oh, this has a like a hazelnut finish and a cranberry body, and I'm like, I don't understand what any of that means.
Yep. And then you move to Costa Rica, and there's three beers, three brands, all made by the same company, and they're all light lagers. And so you could have, light lager number one, light lager number two, or light lager number three. But I'm I did enough of the drinking in my brewery days, so I'm pretty much off that now. But it's interesting seeing the simplicity, and then going back to the States, and yeah, going back to, huge walls of options where, here there's literally three.
Do you think there's a market for that kind of a boom in Costa Rica, or are there just not enough gentlemen wearing plaid and suspenders?
Yeah, in the tourist towns, there's some. I mean, there are some microbreweries that popped up here. A lot of them are bad. Some of them are good. Um, but it's, the whole market's kind of, the trend is downward. You know, Gen Z and Alpha really aren't drinking much. They're healthier, which is good. But the demand's just not there as much. And the kind of I'm in the millennial generation. A lot of my cohorts, settled down, got kids. They're not going out drinking as much. So and then your boomers are having their doctors telling them they shouldn't drink. So all of the kind of just demographic shifts generally are going away from it. But um, we'll see. I'm not sad that I'm not in the industry anymore.
Yeah, I don't believe the thing that they say about Gen Z like being healthier. It's like, oh, they don't drink as much. It's like, yeah, well, how's about we check in on their cocaine or amphetamine consumption? How's about how's about we look at their marijuana consumption? Can we take a look at that before we
Yeah,
start calling them healthier? Like, no, I don't think they're healthier. I think they're just choosing things
it's
that can't be
uh,
statistically quantified.
yeah, the Adderall and pot generation.
Exactly, exactly. Um, in any case, so we're live, obviously. Thank you, Nomad, for joining me today. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were just talking off stream there. Your, uh, for lack of a better word, journey to that got you to like to this point where you're doing this kind of generative photography. So you said you started with learning about the stuff in school, working with what was it, Cinema 3D you called it?
Cinema 4D. It's like
40.
uh, a 3D modeling program, like like Maya or 3ds Max or Blender. But yeah, that's the one that my university kind of paid for the license for, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So you started getting exposed to that in university, and now you've worked your way to Costa Rica. And what is it? What is it that like kind of the through line? Would you say that drew you to get to where you are now?
Um, I don't. I think the when you started seeing the possibilities of what AI could do, from your early GAN models to, diffusion images. I remember in 2021, 2022, starting to play with, when you had Stable Diffusion come out and Midjourney and Dolly, whatever, and that you could kind of get an idea and get it iterate really quickly. And these were, objectively kind of bad images at the time, but it was still, I was kind of super excited and obsessed. I think if you worked anywhere in the industry before, whether it was, from the photo editing side and photography or from 3D animation, you realize how long and how much time it took you to do things, then to try to get, you've got this image in your head, you've got an idea, a visual, but when I'm working in, a 3D program, may take me a month to get what one image would be that I can, if I got it tuned, I can generate in, seconds, minutes now. So the speed of getting from what's in your head to what you can show someone else is just so drastically compressed. It's just super exciting.
Yeah, and how much of your work now would you say is actual photography versus the generated stuff that's around it?
Of the stuff I post like on my feed, almost 100%, 90+% is generative. I do use my photography a lot of times to train LoRa models to produce works. So I don't know if you're familiar, but you can fine tune models with previous outputs or pictures of that you've taken, and you can use those to kind of push a model in a stylistic direction. So I'll use my photography for that. But no, I would say my my photography skills, I like doing it, but I'm more on the high end of hobbyist. I wouldn't call myself a professional photographer. I just it's not, so many people I see their work and are much better than what I'm doing. So I'm mostly sticking with the AI right now.
Understood. So it's not as if you're taking an existing photographic work of yours, and then having AI kind of hallucinate and make all these different generations, but you're actually training the model itself on
Yes.
the photography that you've done and then generating from that.
Yes, absolutely. So no, like you have that picture up there. There's some previous ones. You can kind of see like when I work through a style from the training. So there's like all these. There happens to be these kind of like, I don't, monolithic, almost like Soviet era block buildings. There's pine trees. There's telephone poles. Like these are all things that I've kind of pushed into the model, because I kind of like, even though you can have a diverse set of outputs, like having some visual through points that kind of tie everything together. So those kind of get reinforced, and so like for this image, I'm very visual in terms of my training. My prompts are very short. Some people write these beautiful next great American novel prompts that are very long, but I like to kind of get all the style in the training, and then so this prompt probably was a very short sentence, something about a flooded office, and it'll pull all that out just from the work's kind of in the pre, not the post. If that makes sense.
So in terms of doing this training, is it like you're hosting the model locally or you're accessing it like from a cloud-based service?
I do both. I run Flux locally and Stable Diffusion. I still rent GPUs sometimes if I'm trying to get a lot of outputs at once. Most of my video work is hosted outside because I'm kind of nomadic right now, and I didn't bring my big PC setup with me, so you're running on the NVIDIA card in your gaming laptop in already a very hot room, so it you can't work very quickly doing it all on your own. So outsourcing it usually makes sense, but having the control to be able to do it when you need to is nice.
Yeah, because I'd imagine that like even I mean high-end laptops these days they can still do a decent amount, but like getting like the cutting edge like mid-journey video generation, yeah, you definitely have to purchase credits.
Yeah,
What kind
and
of a
even
setup
that,
are you
like
using?
like mid journey, I would say is pretty low on the pretty far from cutting edge as well. They're outputting at 480. I can output at 480 on my laptop, but yeah, it's video generally is just, it's a much bigger leap for your single gaming card. I think I got a 4090, which was great at the time 3 years ago, but it's still struggles with your WAN your Chinese video open source models.
Yeah, I mean that's no that's still pretty damn good hardware for for a laptop especially.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So in terms of the photography that you actually do um for it, is there are you intentional then with how aware you are in terms of how the model is going to be trained when you actually do the photography, or is it just I'm going out into the world doing photography, capturing what I see as appealing, and then it just turns out that the model is able to create it all? Like how intentional are you with that?
Yeah, usually, so it kind of works one of two ways. One would be, you have this idea and you want to kind of dial in, fine tune the model. So you go out and you just take pictures of that specific thing, and then feed that back in. I do that, maybe a third of the time. What happens a lot of times is you just have, you've got your Google Cloud or whatever of all the photographs you've taken over time, and let's say you want to do a series about, I don't know, well, yeah, I've been kind of doing a lot of stuff with suburbia, so I'm just looking at kind of cookie cutter vinyl houses and looking at pictures I taken on the passive, kind of that, pulling them out and feeding them in. But most times the photography you feed in, I kind of have you kind of have the base level of, this is going to be just like a boring photograph, and then whatever kind of stylistic flourish you want to put on top, that can be added with a separate model, then you can blend them together. So right now I'm kind of doing the glitch aesthetic. The idea is that instead of just being standard glitches, they're photographs that are breaking out of the training data. Was kind of the idea, high level idea, that you kind of see you're producing this photograph, but you see all the images that this photograph was trained on, kind of playing into, like, is this really a creation? Is it just derivative? Is it all just copyright infringement? What's the model ingesting? Does it come out something unique, or is it just slop?
Gotcha. So, and when you're training these models, because I'm not too clear on how that works exactly. Does the, like, let's say you had a generation and then whatever that generation was trained on, right? Whatever, photos you
Hmm.
put before it. When you work on generating like a second piece, does that then carry forward from the first, or is it unique for every single one?
You mean like does the first piece have influence on the second piece?
Well, does the photography that you used to train the model on the first piece, does that like
Hmm.
set of training data get carried over to the second? Because what I'm wondering is like, how concerned are you about getting stuck in a certain theme, or
Right.
in a certain type of generation, or does it just simply like reset?
Yeah, generally you would want to make a new um well, you can do a couple things. One, you could make a whole new model for a new collection or series. Or two, you can you can blend them. So you could say like I want 40% of this model I used on this previous thing, but I'm going to introduce this new element. I'm going to dial back X and really pump up Y. Or you're just going to, you can try to hit a different thematic, angle and keep some of the same aesthetics. So my previous kind of collection style previous to this kind of glitch aesthetic was I did it's called soft collapse, but it was more kind of hallucinatory, uh, wavy, melting world. So you had the photographic kind of houses, but then it was kind of melting apart, kind of in a acid trip style compared to these
Mm-hmm.
very kind of hard edges and digital um, artifacts. But I've also been trying, my kind of ADD brain likes a little bit of everything. So I used to just throw up, a lots of very divergent styles, but I found that with AI being able to do everything so quickly that it sometimes is important to make yourself stick on something for a while to see like what you can dig out of it and really distill down, because otherwise you're just kind of skimming the surface of everything and not really trying to really get to the heart of what you're doing. It just because you can work quickly doesn't mean you should.
Gotcha. Understood. So there's a lot that you can tweak about it. Now, do you have like a background in AI? Have you spent any time like studying it, or is it just a matter of like reading documentation about these models and then just troubleshooting with either Perplexity or ChatGPT or what have you?
um I don't have any professional uh technical knowledge on the AI models. It's mostly yeah YouTube, and there's people on X that are great at doing tutorials and just documentation. But I mean, a lot of it, you can do these custom models in the open source and everything. But I mean, you can get a lot of great stuff using closed source. And Midjourney gets some slack sometimes, but I use it a lot too. Like if I get, it's really good if you can find like 3 or 4 outputs that you've worked on in your train model, you can put those in as image references and kind of make what's kind of like a mini lore. Like it's really good at taking the heart of the aesthetic of what you had and being able to iterate quickly, and then you can take those images and either if it's great, you can use them, or you can feed it back in to kind of retrain the model you're working with. So I mean, you don't need to code, or I think some people think that you have to like puff up all this very technical uh info just to validate yourself as doing art. But I don't think it's a tool in the toolbox, but it's not necessary, and a lot of people do great work just straight from a corporate website.
Understood. Yeah. And in terms of copyrights, if you use the open source model, I'm guessing like all the ownership stays with you, or
In terms of like the outputs,
that's right. Yeah.
um yeah, this is kind of my so in law school, I my focus was on digital copyright law and stuff. So this whole AI era is really interesting for me because it's the first time in a long time where lot of question marks and no real answers.
Hmm.
Um, but so like so the as it is, whether it's Midjourney or Chat GPT or your locally trained model, the companies, most of them in the terms of service, the companies don't own it. You own it, but the Copyright Office in the U.S. has said that there is no copyright for an AI output, because there needs to be human authorship, right? So since just writing a prompt or training the model or doing whatever, they don't consider right now to be enough human. So it's like the monkey that took the photograph of the photographer can't get a copyright because the monkey is not a human. Um, so when working with corporate clients or people now, what you have to do is show that you've edited, tweaked, changed the image enough with inpainting and whatever else that you can submit it and get the copyright because you've transformed it through human touch. Otherwise, any raw output is fair game and public domain, with the current understanding.
Wait, so let me get this straight. So as it stands right now, at least in terms of the way that the U.S. Copyright Office sees it, any generated output using an AI model, whether it's commercial or open source, closed source, what have you, there is no way for anyone to file like copyright ownership of that generation because it's not made by a person, unless you can prove that like there's an aspect of that generation that is made by a person.
That's correct. So so images are trickier because a lot of people will, there's lots of NFTs and artwork that sell for quite a bit of money, and yeah, you could hypothetically you know right click save and sell it, put it on a coffee mug, do whatever, and there'd be no recourse other than just the ethics and moral shaming, hopefully. But it does get, like, when you go into like video work, you're a lot safer because then it's a composition, right? You've got your AI images, you've got audio, whether that's AI or traditional, you've got editing, you've got all this, so that composition is copyrighted, but the individual AI videos that go into it would not be. Um, there was the case early on with the comic book that used AI pictures. So the pictures in the comic book didn't hold a copyright, but the composition of the text with the images as a whole piece, then it is.
So let's say hypothetically, because I'd love to pick your brain on this. Hypothetically, if I had, let's say, an AI that was trained on the entirety of Disney's works of Mickey Mouse, right? Just everything, not Steamboat Willie, because I know that's part of the public domain now, but like the
Right.
Mickey Mouse. So like I fed it, Mickey Mouse's Clubhouse, all the movies that he's been in, merch, like what have you. I take the entire stock of everything Mickey Mouse from Disney, and if I made an Andy Warhol type pop art piece with Mickey Mouse in different shades of color. The form is still the same. The
Mhm.
classic whatever Mickey pose that he has is still the same, but I just tessellated multiple times on a piece and I give it different colors and all that. That generated work, would that be subject to copyright? Because I know, like, ignoring Disney's how should I say, uh exuberant joy that they have with going after people, um, with lawsuits and whatnot. Ignoring that, would that like actually stand in court? Would their claim stand in court that this is infringing the copyright based on what you've told me?
So uh, not a currently practicing IP lawyer, so it
No,
gets
no,
a
fair enough. Yep, yep.
little hazy. But so my understanding would be, so when I say the outputs aren't copyrightable, that would be from the person making the generation. That doesn't mean that the output isn't infringing someone's else's copyright. If I tell Midjourney to make me a just a to take the Warhol aspect out first, because that kind of does give it a little area gray. If I just say I want a a video screenshot of Avengers Endgame, whatever,
Hmm.
and then it makes that, and I slap that on a T-shirt, Disney can sue you for that, and they have a good case, right? Because that it doesn't matter that they didn't make that image if it's representing their intellectual property. It doesn't matter whether you took a screen grab from the movie, or you made something that was never in the movie but still uses those characters. Mickey Mouse is also tricky because it's also a trademark. It's an identifying mark of Disney. So they can get around some of that just because it's also the mark they use in commerce. But the Warhol one would be, it would be gray. They probably still have a case. There was a recent, I know this is getting in the weeds, but there was a recent Supreme Court case, like, I don't know, three years ago, where Andy Warhol's estate got sued because he used a image of Prince that was from Getty Images or whatever, from a photographer, and then he did his Warhol thing on top of it.
Right.
And he did it for a magazine, right? A magazine cover. They put it on there, but then the magazine paid the rights to Getty or whoever it was. But then he wanted to sell that to someone else, so Getty sued them and said, "Hey, you didn't have the right to use this photograph, even though it was transformed," and the Warhol estate lost. So even though it was, it wasn't the exact image, it had the kind of the Warhol, change distortion on it. They held that he still needed the rights to the individual, the original photograph. So that's probably where your Mickey Mouse example would lie, and it wouldn't really have anything to do with AI. It would just have to do with you're using a property that has, secured rights to it.
Interesting. Because I figured something like this would not cause any issues. I mean, I get it. Like, there's these are like the big names in terms of like pop culture and media, whether it's like Getty Images, Prince, or Warhol. So obviously, like, whenever it's any of these types of people involved, they're gonna, they have the legal team. They're gonna have them, go through every single detail of the law and try to pick out any inconsistencies and see if there's anything that they can capture on that. But that, yeah, it to me as a spectator, it comes off as like a little bit strange because, like, clearly,
yeah,
it's not the original piece. It's obviously inspired from it, and he's taken some kind of, I don't know, a rotoscope or what have you, like, just imprint of it, but it's still made into a different work. It's stylized differently. There's there's enough of an Andy Warhol like thumbprint on it.
Right. And I would, like, if I was on the court, that's where I'd land too. I think it'd be transformative enough is the language. Is it transformative enough to be its own work? And I would lean on that being transformative, but I would be wrong, I guess, at least with the current understanding. If he had taken inspiration from that and maybe sketched it out, and it's not an exact kind of copy paste, he'd probably have a stronger leg to stand on. But yeah, as it is, because it is the exact imprint, they found it to be infringing.
Gotcha. So it's not as if that I can take copyrighted materials to train a model on and then generate something that is slightly different, like with this example with Prince, that is like copyright free, or I wouldn't have to worry about a lawsuit. It's just that if I generate something with a model, whether it's Midjourney or what have you, that generation, whatever it is that generates, whether it's a video or a photo, I can't place a copyright on that. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, and then there's another wrinkle too. That's why it's like I just kind of find the whole area exciting, just because there's so many different elements to it. So the inputs, the outputs we've been talking about, the inputs are another area. So like the New York Times suing OpenAI ChatGPT right now because they say they're trained on the New York Times. Midjourney is being sued by Disney for both inputs and outputs, but right now it's unclear. There was actually the AI action plan came out of the Trump administration on Wednesday or Thursday, and they talked about it wasn't in the plan, but in the speech, their position was that inputs shouldn't be copyrighted. The AI is like a person; you're learning, but you're not actually, as long as you're not regurgitating those exact inputs as outputs, that it should be in the clear. But it's not settled law, and if courts swing the other way on that could have huge implications for pretty much all AI models right now, because there's not a single company. Well, I think there's that Moon Valley video that uses all licensed work, and I think Adobe uses for their photo generation all licensed, but most big models kind of rely on not paying royalties for inputs.
Okay, so that then brings me to the question of like how is it that they can ascertain, like, let's say this lawsuit goes forward and Disney or that whatever big conglomerate, like, they win and against Midjourney and all these other people, and they say, hey, like, um clearly through the generated outputs we can see that you guys have actually trained the models on a lot of our content, and you have not in any way contacted us about it or arranged for anything with us about it. How do they actually go about confirming that this is in fact the case? Like, what is stopping the AI company from, um, you ever watch SpongeBob growing up?
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah, you remember that episode when when Squidward tries to impress his old high school friend, and SpongeBob becomes like the super like waiter, all he knows is fine dining and breathing.
I don't remember that one, but sounds
Well,
about right.
oh yeah, there's a scene where like he's essentially like just trying to help Squidward out, and Squidward says, okay, all you need to know is fine dining and breathing, and then there's like a little cutaway to like what's happening in SpongeBob's head, and they're like just dumping everything, like how to tie his shoelaces, all his like memories with friends and all that, and they're all just it's a fire sale, they're just burning everything.
Yeah.
What is stopping those AI companies from just like, I don't know, deleting any kind of trail that, like, even if this
Yeah.
lawsuit wins, like, and they say, okay, now you got to open up your books, now you got to actually show us the training data and all that. I mean, they would be incentivized, I would say, to like completely just dump that and get rid of it. Is that not a possibility, or is there like a way somehow
Yeah.
in like the code or some
Uh,
kind of like history, like is there even a paper trail? What I'm getting at is like, is there a
sure.
paper trail that can actually show that this was the case?
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of look back and you can see the point in time where these AI companies, you either got legal departments or figured out the risk, because early on they would tell you, more on the LLM side than on the diffusion image side, but they'd say, here we trained this on this corpus of data, the internet, these books, blah blah blah. I mean, the foundation of all LLMs are based on Books 3, which is a large torrent, a torrent of pretty much all the scanned PDFs of books in existence, and that's how all these models got started, whether it's Meta, OpenAI, Anthropic, what have you. So I mean, there's there's a lot of blatant that, I mean, how they're trying to prove it. They're like, from Midjourney, there was cases where they were able to recreate, like, back to the Avengers thing. I think they had some scene with Thanos, and they were able to get the exact output from a input of the movie and say, like, this is, this couldn't have recreated this perfectly, like, lay over it with opacity and it fits if it wasn't in the training. For the New York Times one, the lawyers tried to, like, trick the model into, like, they'd write three paragraphs of a piece that's behind a paywall, and GPT was able to, like, then pop out the next two paragraphs of it. Like, so there's lots of kind of just legal trickery, but absolutely the AI companies are, when you look now what they're trained on, like, everything is tight-lipped. To your point, they don't want to say anything. These video models, a lot of them are trained on YouTube and other streaming data. Well, that goes against Google's terms of service, so you can't say you're doing that. Things like Reddit, they've some of them have worked out licensing deals, so OpenAI and Google pay Reddit to scrape the data there, but Anthropic doesn't, and they still train on it, so they're in a lawsuit with Reddit. There's just kind of all these little nuances.
Yeah, well, there's that famous interview with the ex OpenAI executive. I forget her name, but there's an interview where she's asked this exact question, and the face that she gives in response to the person asking it, because it was right around the time when they had released Sora, so they were like going on this press tour talking about it.
Yeah.
What data was used to train Sora?
Yeah, you just can't, like, you realize you can't. Mira Murati, I think, is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, you can't. It's until there's legal certainty, you really can't say anything. And I know, I mean, it's a very hot button issue. If you want to get a lot of engagement and furry lovers yelling at you on X, you can just start talking about AI and copyright. But I really do see it as if we think these models really are learning and ingesting, it's no different than if someone goes to college and they're learning art from the great masters, and they're having teachers tell them things, and they're reading books. Like, no one creates in isolation. If you had someone chained in Plato's cave, and he's there for 20 years, and then you gave him paints and a and a canvas, it'd probably turn out like shit, right? Like, everyone, we build on top of inspirations. You find people that you like, and maybe you start with kind of blatant, very stealing the style. You blend it with someone else's style, and finally you kind of find your own aesthetic, your own something that's yours. But I think it's very few people that just in a void, like God creating Eden, just like, oh, this is my creative output, and it's solely me. I just don't, the way it works.
Yeah, no, I certainly get your meaning there. But why would the furries be pissed off?
I don't really know why, but on X, there's a thing. Anytime you talk about copyright, there's these small accounts who happen to all have their feeds are all just furry, mostly not safe for work images, and they just scream at you vulgar things that you're destroying artists or XYZ. I don't know. It's a strange microcosm. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yep. World's a strange place.
Yeah, because I certainly agree with you that we're entering a new age where I think the idea of copyright, for better or for worse, is redundant. Like, it's just not the right question to ask, I don't think. Just because, like, at the end of the day, it's one thing for all these studios to be suing these giant companies, whether it's Midjourney or OpenAI or what have you. It's like, okay, that's great and all, but what's going to stop me from using an open source model and training it on, the Avengers or Mickey Mouse or what have you, pick your IP, and just generating images. I mean, it's the same thing as like how like movie studios back in like the early 2000s, or even giant like music labels, they would go after, like, whether it's Napster or LimeWire or what have you, all these different torrenting websites. And it's like, okay, but that's not going to stop, George down the street from, just recording the show on VHS and just selling it on the corner. Like that used to be a big thing. And in a lot of parts of the world, like, that's still how a lot of people consume their media. Like, I remember I was visiting some family in Russia once, and we go to this like general store just getting some groceries, and they have these display racks for like the DVDs and PC games back when they used to sell them on discs. And you can tell just like by whether it's the flimsy the actual plastic packaging for it or just the cover art, you can tell that this was clearly just like ripped from somewhere. And this is getting sold in like a department store, and it's not as if anybody from these games, whether it's Call of Duty or what have you, is gonna call them up or try to get them for copyright infringement. Like, how are you actually gonna stop people that are acting independently as individuals and not as like giant conglomerates or what have you from pursuing this? Like, is there really anything that you can do to stop the floodgates? Like, yeah, maybe at like the big points and the big companies, but realistically, there's not really much anyone can do.
Yeah, I mean, Russia's a whole can of worms. I mean, there are countries that just don't respect IP laws, and that's always been kind of a thing. And it's also just it's an issue of scale, right? Usually for a company to track down and put an enforcement lawsuit, there needs to be enough damages, and someone needs to be able to pay. So back to your kind of Avengers example, if you train that on a local model, you made it, that's probably fine. They probably don't care that much. You could even put it on your Tumblr or whatever. They're not going to probably contact you. Now you take that with AI video and you try to release on Netflix your Avengers knockoff and get, a $10 million, down payment to make that. That's when copyright comes in, and there'll be, an injunction and enforcement. It's when you put it in commerce that I think really triggers it.
Gotcha. Understood. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I figured that's essentially what it would be at, because I know that like on YouTube, for instance, when we started uploading episodes, we were getting copyright strikes for just like certain like music that we're using as we're recording, or just visuals
Yep.
that we have, and I didn't realize just how laser focused the copyright infringement was. Like it would take like seconds of like a song clip and be like, oh, you can't
Yep.
use that. And the thing is, like, the episode is like 2-3 hours long. That clip is like, it's only like a fraction of it, and it's not as if I'm sitting there like listening to the whole album. I just played like
Right.
a bit of the track just to, like, I don't know, make a point, or make a reference, or just bring something up. And still it would like copyright strike me, and that just reminded me, like, oh, they have a dedicated service that is crawling the web at all times for any generated content that is potentially infringing on it. They scan the audio, they'll scan the video, and that's just on YouTube. That's not even talking about maybe there's like some third-party companies that are actually operating in the space that are essentially like hunting down people to make
Yep.
DMCA claims against them. I remember Twitch had a big problem with that at some point, where a lot of these big labels were like threatening to sue them for essentially like back pay for all the streams that had been done up until that point. And this was like right as Twitch was coming up, and this would have meant like hundreds of millions worth of fines that they would have had to pay. I forget the workaround that they figured out, but now it's not as much of a problem, because when you stream now, I notice like it's not an issue to like play it on stream, but the moment that you have it recorded as a VOD and you post it on YouTube or Spotify, like that's when it actually becomes a problem.
Exactly, because that's when they run it through their algorithm to see if there's infringing data on it. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, YouTube, Google needed to do that. They'd rather just have everything up and take the ad data. But once they got into traditional media and YouTube TV, and they needed to work with these rights holders, this was kind of their compromise. Because Warner Brothers, Universal, Disney, whoever, had been pissed at YouTube forever, right? So once they needed to have a working relationship, the copyright checks kind of were the thing that was given to them to kind of balance between user uploads and rights.
Understood. Yeah. And no, just back to the point earlier, I guess in the future, where do you see this actually going? Because like regardless of, like I said, how these lawsuits go against the big companies, there's not really much stopping the individual from training all these tiny models, or just having them pump out
Right.
all these different generations. What does copyright even look like in the future? Is it even something that anyone can enforce? I mean, you can have like a decent following, where you're not just selling to people on the corner, but you have a Discord server, or an X account or Instagram account or whatever with a couple thousand people. Like, you can still generate a decent amount of stuff and make a decent amount of like ad revenue from it. But something that that there's going to be plenty of people that exist outside of that scope that can use those models, no problem. So that it just I don't know, it seems like a fruitless endeavor from it. And I think that there's not a clear enough way for people, just the average creator that's not using these models, that is actually just pumping out original content, to actually go against these people that are stealing it. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure the moment that you upload an image to like DeviantArt or what have you, there's a bot that'll scrape it and then put it on some like Alibaba account that is auto-generated, and slap it on a t-shirt or what have you. Like, what does copyright even mean going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time, especially because everything's just diffuses so quickly to everyone, right? I mean, to your example, I would say the example is not much different than the aspiring illustrator who draws, pictures of Aladdin or Mulan or whatever. Just pick your Disney animated movie and draws or paints exact things. People could reproduce outputs just through human artistic works forever. There's been forgeries of paintings, since the beginning of time. So I think it's not the being able to recreate it that's different. It's the there's such scale and people can it can go so quickly into so many places. My personal thought is copyright's been expanding and pushed further and further since it was established, and the whole reason was try to compensate people for creative works and encourage them to make more. And I don't personally think that getting pennies back from a large AI company is why you made that work in the first place, right? Like that's not the incentive to do that. Wasn't when Disney makes the adventures there, it's the worldwide box office, and then DVDs, that's where their hit is. It's the person putting a picture on Facebook isn't that's not part of their model. But I think there'll still be a place for it. Coming from like the crypto art side, I think NFTs, although they're kind of maligned now, I think rights managements with NFTs are a good example of a way forward with property. I can sell one of my artworks as an NFT. Someone buys that. We can see throughout history that they own that. Now, anyone else on my X feed or in my gallery, they can right-click save. They can take it to a printer, do it. But it's what they don't have is the provenance, right? They don't have that. I paid the artist for this, and I can show that it's mine. And I think that's kind of where it'll move to. Like, I don't care if someone else, wants to take something, print it out, put it over their fireplace. That really doesn't bother me, because I made my money on that primary sale, and I'll make money on future sales through royalties possibly. But it's just a different way of viewing things.
Yeah, because crypto should certainly have a role to play in this, because like that's one of the like more easily verifiable ways of tracking down like when the work was generated, on which platform, where was it sold, who was the buyer. You may not have like identifiable information, but there is a paper trail that you can follow in terms of when this was first minted and how many editions and so on and so forth. So that might
Right.
certainly be one avenue for at least like independent creators to go about it.
Yeah, because I mean the other issue with getting in the weeds of copyright, the other big issue is we dropped the registration requirement for copyright way back. So right now you can have a copyright, but the Copyright Office doesn't have a record of who you are, where you're located at. So let's see the courts tell Midjourney you need to compensate proportionally. So they have 10 billion images, so they need to give 1/10 of 1 penny to all these small artists they pulled their 5 images from.
Mhm.
Well, they have no idea. I mean, most of the time, the money spent trying to track them down and write these fractional checks would greatly outweigh the actual payments done. Outside of your Disney, your there'd be the loudest voices kind of screaming about this are kind of the small guys, and the small guys are kind of going to be fucked either way, right? If there is a payout scheme, the small people are going to be too de minimis to get a payout in the first place. So you're going to have maybe some upside for your large media conglomerates, but not for your independent artists.
Yeah, because as you said, like it's how are you gonna track all those people down, especially if like they're not all living within the U.S. If they're living just from all over,
Right.
like how many of those people are even gonna respond to that message? I mean, like first of all, yeah, how do you track them down? Like I recently got an email
Yeah.
from I used to be subscribed to the Daily Wire some years back, and I just got an email from them saying like, oh, there's a lawsuit where there was an infringement on people's personal information that they were selling to Facebook. I was like, okay, there's a clear line there. I was signed up. They had my email, so on and so forth. But how do you even how do you go about submitting that claim as like an artist? Like, what if someone already set up
Right.
another account in that exact name, or what if they claim it before you do? Then how do you go about? I mean, it's just it's a clusterfuck. Like, how do you even untangle that web?
Yeah, so I think, I don't know if there's a perfect solution, but the nice thing with this, NFT authorship setup is, if there's a track record of the piece and it's tied to blockchain, Ethereum, whatever, you could have a way where money could be sent just directly to that account without even knowing what the person's name is, where they are. They could
Hmm.
be anywhere in the world. It kind of like how royalty setups are now. So if someone, for the marketplaces that respect royalties, if someone takes one of my artworks, sells it to someone else, it should trigger 5-10% that automatically gets sent back to my account. And I don't have to be a part of it. They don't have to know anything about me where I am. It's just done seamlessly. So I think there really is something there that could be used more broadly. I just, it'd have to be an overall kind of rethink of the system.
Yeah, it makes me think of like maybe one possibility is that when these models are actually trained on this, like let's say um you make a model that's trained exclusively on like the biggest NFT marketplace. Name doesn't come to mind, but regardless,
OpenSeas or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
OpenSea, yeah. Like let's say it's trained on all of OpenSea's generations, and as part of that training, it includes the actual address, like on chain, of the account that initially posted it and who it was sold to, and so on and so forth. Um, Maybe if it had that like information instead of just web scraping and saving it as JPEGs and just going from there. Maybe if it actually included like the address of the wallets and everything, um, that would be like, as you said, an easier way of going about it, because then on every sale or new generation or what have you, in that it would include like a piece that says, hey, by the way, 10, 15, however much percent was actually from this artist, 20% was from this artist, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. The whole situation definitely is still it's still tricky because you have to kind of decide how much, if you're training on billions of images, how do you decide, when you have an output, it doesn't tell you I took 5% from this and 1% for that, and it's kind of it's learning from everything and then recreating. But there's probably something novel. I know some people have thrown out, people will use the kind of like the prompting like in the style of, so I
Mhm.
want to make a kids thing, and I'm like in the style of Disney's Pixar. So they could do something, which again would mostly just benefit large conglomerations, but they could say every time they say in the style of X, we see that prompt, and we do the Spotify model where once 10,000 people do that, we send $1 to X creator. Um, but but yeah, it's kind of the new frontier. My personal thought is, back to Disney, that the inputs shouldn't be copyrightable. That if you take, let's say you train a Laura all on the animation of Disney's Aladdin, and then but your outputs are a 1950s retro space opera,
Mhm.
and this kind of the painting style is in kind of the style of Aladdin, but I would think that's transformative enough that it nods to it. But to me, that A wouldn't be infringing, and B, there would not need to be any royalties paid, because you're taking the inspiration from one thing and you're transforming it into a new creative work.
Yeah, it's like who do we make the check out to? Like the 1950s, whoever came up with that style. Like
Yeah,
yeah. How do you divide that? Interesting. Do you mind if we just take a quick 5-minute break here?
yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, we'll be right back, guys. Beautiful. Okay, and we're back. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Lots of cool stuff happening in the copyright world these days.
Yeah. I was gonna say, do you want to quickly go over the company and Outsider and what you do? And so I really kind of be curious. I've been jabbering on about copyright. I don't know if you usually talk about that, but I'd be interested.
Yeah, no, we certainly can. And no, I mean, in terms of the tempo for these kind of interviews, we just like to give artists as much space to just talk about whatever,
Sure.
whether it's like their own experience, their art, or any of these topics. So yeah, by all means, yap away. But yeah, so for Outsider Supply, let me just pull up our website here. This was a company that was started by Mackenzie and her best friend. Let's see if I can find her page here. Yeah, that's her right there. So they started it back in 2020, I want to say, and the initial goal was to just essentially create a clothing label that was able to use past art movements and artists that are now part of the public domain in order to make the clothing. So, for example, let me see if I can find, yeah, like the Renaissance collection, like obviously all that stuff is a matter of public domain at this point. So they were able to generate a lot of these interesting pieces from it.
Yeah.
And we have had collabs with the not the foundations, but I'm looking for the right word here. I guess the estates, right? The estates of
Mhm.
past dead artists. Like we had a collab with, I believe it was Vogue magazine. Let me just make sure I got it right here. Cultured magazine, sorry, Cultured magazine,
Uh-huh.
where we did a piece for Lee Krasner and Jackson Pollock and John Chamberlain.
Oh, cool.
And we had to reach out to their estates just to make sure that everything was copacetic with them, and ended up making these hats for Cultured Mag, who had them on their store for a little bit. It was a bit of a limited drop that we did for them. But
Uh-huh.
for the most part, we focus on artists and art movements that are like purely public domains, so that we have like no issues of copyright or anything like that.
Right.
And so I think our last collection, no, the antiquities. Yeah, like this one perfectly exemplifies it. So like obviously antiquities being, you know, centuries old, there's not really anyone that's gonna cause us an issue there.
Yeah. Knock at your door. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So yeah, they make the designs, and part of what we want to do with these interviews and all the other media that we're pushing out is we want to um, essentially open source art. So in these interviews, we'll ask artists like about the process, you know, what models they use, if they have generative art, what kind of lens do they use, if it's photography, what's their editing process like, and we have them walk through it. So we've been fortunate enough to have just about everybody except like performance art, I would say, like anything like music
Mhm.
or like dance related, anything like that. But everyone from digital designers to classically trained painters to photographers who actually like develop their own work. So it's a very, very wide range of people that we try to encapsulate. And yeah, we want to
Awesome.
make it so that art is not, it's not this thing that you need a degree to understand. You don't need to have even a fundamental understanding of um, different aspects of art, whether it's like composition, color mixing, any and all that. We want to make it so that art gets into the hands of as many people as possible, because at the end of the day, it's not, it shouldn't just be something that you notice in a gallery, you know, once in a while whenever you have the time to make a trip. Art is something
Right.
that is all around us. Everything that has ever been made, there was someone that had to create like some kind of design element to it. So understanding that and appreciating it is part of like what we want to spread out into the world, because it is in everything, whether it's architecture or the tools that you use. Somebody had to sit there, you know, behind a desk, whether it's an AutoCAD or just manual drawings, to come up with it, and that deserves to be recognized, because it isn't this like outside external thing that we just, you know, experience when we go to art class in school, or when you go to see like a gallery and think like, no, it's a constantly evolving process that is all around us at all times, and we being aware of that, I think it can only enrich your life.
Yep, totally agree. Yeah, I think even before AI, just the general Web 2 internet revolution has really democratized at least the accessibility of art, and then with the Web 3 NFT movement, I think it can bring some more, hopefully even more people in, that it's not yet, like you said, it's not a stuffy thing where you have to be in a major city and go to a gallery. That it can be, art should be something that can be appreciated on a daily basis, and it shouldn't matter the size of your paycheck or where you're located in order to do so.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's I think it's a universal aspect of the human experience that everyone can um have some appreciation for art. Like I was just talking about this with my friend the other day. Like if it's one thing to not like a certain genre of music, but if you ever meet a person that just straight up says I don't like music in any way, shape, or form, I like that's a psychopath. That's someone that you
Right, I was gonna
ostracize,
say.
yeah, from your society.
You
You
check
get rid of them.
you check their deep freeze for the bodies, right? It's
Yeah, absolutely. It's like anyone that like doesn't like feel a certain way when a beat comes on, like even if it's a feeling of disgust, it's like no, I want nothing to do with it. It's like yeah, there's something fundamentally wrong with that person, because the act of creation, it's an innately human trait that there's not really any other like species that kind of share it. I mean, there's that one, I don't think it's pufferfish, but it's forget the name, but there's this type of like a deep undersea fish that will actually make uh I mean, yeah, what can be essentially like classified as art in order to attract a mate, but it's actually like very, very intricate. Let me see if I can find.
yeah.
Uh,
I was big into saltwater fish tanks for a while, so I had a lot of, and I get a snorkel most days, so I like my saltwater fish, but yeah, I can't think of what that would be. Oh,
yeah, it is a pufferfish, so it would take
okay,
it
cool.
would create these dig outs in the sand, but when you zoom out,
Wow,
it's like oh,
that's awesome.
that's a work of art.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful.
You know?
The pufferfish, the larger pufferfish are around here in the Pacific. The yellow and the dogfish and the black spotted, but they kind of have like the personality of dogs. And when you snorkel or scuba dive, they'll follow you around, especially once they
Mm.
get to know you. And you flip over rocks so they can eat the snails and bristleworms and stuff. So they'll literally just kind of like tag on the side of you. It's kind of funny how much personality can be in just a fish.
Yeah, that's that's pretty adorable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so like we're
So,
one of the
yeah.
only species to actually like to make the time and effort to uh, create galleries and to build monuments, and for people to spend, some of us, every waking hour working on these pieces for one reason or another. And so
Yeah.
I think embracing that spirit, and even in as little way as you can, is like just doing your own little sketches or writing poetry or um, any creative output is it's vital to have. It's I think it's as vital
Right.
beyond like once you have shelter, water, food, and safety. Like then the next thing I would say becomes art. Like what is it that you can actually make? Um,
Right.
it's just as vital, because when you don't have that form of expression, it essentially kills a part of you. I mean, even the Soviets recognize that we need to have great art, right? Even
Yep.
in a society like that, they recognize that, like, yeah, like, okay, fine, it's state sanctioned and there's got to be all these rules around what people can and can't do, but they need an artistic output, otherwise
Yeah.
people are going to go insane.
Right. We still have the opera. Right. It's,
Exactly.
yeah. And I think with AI, the great thing is it really has kind of lowered the threshold for entry, at least for people. I think there can be a lot more people that can kind of begin to play with things. Claire Silver, digital artist, her thing, catchphrase was that taste is the new skill, and I really do think there is
Mm-hmm.
something to that as AI continues to progress. There's kind of like two sides of every artistic process, right? There's the technical side, the someone that's really good at carving the marble, or you're a really good programmer and you're programming this algorithmic art, or you can paint very photographic things. But then there's the taste, the what's in your head, what are you trying to get onto the screen, what are you trying to convey, and those are two very different things, and a lot of times those are different sides of the brain, right? So someone may be a very good technical sketch artist, let's say, but they may make very mid artwork, right? They have no there's no taste there.
Mm-hmm.
They draw a tree and it's flat. And there may be someone else who has worlds inside their head, but in a couple hundred years ago, if they didn't have the technical skill, the fine motor skills to get that onto a screen, we as a society wouldn't see that, right? And I think with AI now, you've lowered. I have huge respect for technical skills, and I think they're, especially as AI hypothetically takes more and more of labor first. I think having things that are made by hands, I think there's still a huge value in that. But I think in terms of the taste side, more and more people are going to be able to get out what they want to convey and not have to worry about technical engineering, fine motor, whatever skills in order to do so.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've heard this meme made in like tech bro circles where like this is the age of the ideas guy, and
Yeah,
no, that certainly tracks. I've heard many people talk about this because as you said, if the threshold for actually generating the work becomes lower and lower and lower, then it's not so much the emphasis goes away from technical skill to the person that is able to actually curate uh, taste and
right.
create value through that way. Um, Kind of in the
Yeah, the
same way how
bottleneck
like
is the bottleneck's your creativity, not how long it takes you to get it on a page.
exactly. I mean, it's the same thing happened with photography, where before you had to take it to a development business, or you actually like had to assemble a room within your own house that was specifically for this, and know all these different types of
Right.
chemicals and how exposed they should be, and so on and so forth. Um, Now with digital, it's like, okay, well, you can take that shot as many times as you like. Essentially, it's just a matter of like, okay, how good is your framing? How good is your
Right.
composition? How good are you with understanding how light is playing in this exact scene, or shutter speed, or f-stop number, or what have you? Now
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well,
Right.
what is the actual uh, approach that you have towards capturing the scene? That becomes more important than
Right.
doing the actual capturing.
And I think it does result in a lot more slop, a lot more bad content, right? The same thing with photography. Once everyone had a pretty damn good camera in their pocket and they could broadcast it, they had distribution to the whole world. We have way more out of focus pictures of avocado toast than we ever need.
Yep.
But that 2% that someone had that in their pocket and was able to capture a great iconic scene, it's worth filtering through all the slop just for that extra benefit of that little bit we get. 99% of everything is bad, right? But being able to have 2% more at a large scale of anything creative, I think still the people who focus on the slop part are kind of missing the forest for the trees. That there's a lot of creative works, whether it's video or art, that didn't get done because of it got the cutting room floor. There wasn't the budget for it. The producer said no. You couldn't pay to do it. That now can get done, and I think that's a huge net win for society.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the same can be said about the different types of books that you see. I mean, anyone that's like ever browsed the book section at like a pharmacy or like a drugstore, you'll one second.
Yep.
Oh, thought I was gonna sneeze. You'll notice that like a lot of these books, they're most of the time it's like some kind of like weird like romantic uh, erotic fantasy of a woman and like a werewolf or a minotaur or what have you, and they just have these like weird covers that look like from the 2000s. And in the
Yeah.
same vein, you have uh the Harry Potter series, or Philip Pullman's The Dark Materials, or any of these like great books that had we not had the advancement of the printing press and Microsoft Word and all these different things, like they wouldn't have been made. So like, yeah, there's a lot of slop out there in text too, but
Yep.
nobody's really like nobody's bringing up a stink because they can still go to Indigo or Chapters or what have you, and get their New York Times best-selling novels, or whichever
Right.
books they like. It's like there's that trade-off again. It's just that now like AI is like the new thing, and it's a lot more complicated and tricky, so people get triggered a lot quicker on it. But realistically, like this has happened before. It's just now we're in a different. It's a different paradigm shift. That's all it is.
Right. And probably, I mean, it's probably a different scale as well, but yeah, and there are risks probably of things getting lost. When you just have seas, huge, vast amounts of content out there. Like, it really does come down to, you do need some respected organizations or people or tastemakers to kind of weed through and do the hard work of curation to at least find some things, because you can't expect the normal normal person who likes art but has an 8 to 5 job and has 2 kids and has to mow the yard. Like, you can't expect them to filter through copious amounts of work to find that diamond in the rough. So I think more than ever, having people that can kind of find and kind of highlight and push work out is going to be more and more important.
Yeah, certainly. I've seen it in parenting circles, especially. I remember there was this one company that their whole business is set up around curating content for kids that is avoidant of the Coco Melon slop, and is trying to focus more on value building and um, social conditioning that is like more in gear with what certain parents want for their kids. Something for more like
Yeah.
conservative, traditional like background, that kind of thing. And they were actually making a business of it, where they're like, hey, if you pay us, I think it's like a subscription basis or something, like we'll give you a curated list of works that are in the public domain. We'll send you all the like the highest quality like download links and everything, so that you can find it for yourself. I think they even have an app or some kind of a web-based platform for it, because I mean, yeah, as a parent, it's a real concern. Like there's a real method to the madness of Cocomelon, where it's actually just geared towards creating the most addictive slop ever. Um,
It's
like they have it down to a science. They made it so addicting that it's become like one of the top like series that you'll see a mom at Chili's or what have you just whip out her iPad and just give it to the kid, and next thing you know, you hear that infamous intro, and that does something to children, that socializes them in a very particular way that I don't think, and I don't think a lot of people think is I don't know, a standard base of fundamentals upon which you can build a coherent life. I mean, like what's gonna happen to all the skibbity toilet kids in 10 years? Like
right.
what does that actually do to the brain? Like, I know what that stuff does to my brain, and I'm nearing my 30s. Like I know just how bad that is, but like I have the wherewithal to know how to change my algorithm, but I'm not.
Right.
I have no idea what it's like to be a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old at this time, where your parents, they'll just give you the iPad at the slightest, sign of an inconvenience.
Yeah. I think there are lots of risks involved in that. And Cocomelon, especially, my brother has 2 kids. I got a niece and nephew, and it's crazy when they're of a certain age. It's like crack. I don't know if they focus grouped a million kids and just found just pure dopamine, but it's horrible and crazy. But then I step back. The other thing is, every generation thinks that the next generation's going to hell in a handbasket. So my generation was video games, and specifically violent video games. We were all going to become school shooters, and
Hmm.
that didn't pan out. And before, it was the satanic panic of D&D and metal music, and before that. So I think there definitely are harms, and I try to balance what's harmful and what's me just trying to yell at the clouds because I'm old and I don't understand it. He's probably a little column.
Yeah, your mic is fading in and out there a little bit. I don't know if you're far away from it or.
Yeah, let me the battery. All right, is this better?
Oh yeah, there you go.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance because like yeah, you want your kids to, you know, not be out of the loop because that kind of socially ostracizes them. But then also like, what is the cost of being, in the loop that they have to consume this kind of media? I mean, like every now and then, 'cause like I got nieces and like I'll go over to to hang out with them, and I just like see the kind of content that they're exposed to. And I remember like what I used to watch, and like it's worlds apart. I don't know
Right.
how else to put it. It's such a different form of I don't know whether it's a style or the kind of stories that they tell, but everyone, like, as you said, like likes to think that the next generation is just screwed and theirs had it right. um but it certainly seemed like a lot of the content that I consumed growing up was just a little bit less of an info hazard, or a lot less of
Yeah.
an info hazard than the new stuff.
The attention span is, I mean, it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. Like even like the kids episodes now, there's like the plot will be, if they have a 30-minute episode, it's five mini things that are 5-minute little one
Mhm.
and done, like just long. I think waiting for long payoff of a a story arc that starts somewhere and has a climax and a resolution just really isn't. It's like boy falls off the bridge, gets saved, everyone cheers, and it's all done. Nicely packaged, so you can, watch it super quickly. And I mean, I think TikTok and social media. I mean, adults are probably kind of falling in the same situation. The whole attention economy is getting pretty interesting.
Yeah, but I have faith that it's gonna go in the positive direction because in the same vein that like this is happening with reels and whatnot and kids TV, um, podcasts are becoming like among the top like consumed media because people do want something long form. They do want to see two or more people just think through an idea and just have a back and forth that goes over an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And I think that's a direct reaction to just people being like, all right, enough is enough. I'm tired of these reels. I want to actually hear a normal conversation between two people that I either respect or I'm curious about or what have you. um which goes
Yeah,
against the idea that like, oh yeah, no, like everyone's losing their attention spans. Like, no, I don't think they're losing their attention span. I think they're just they're beholden to the algorithm because the algorithms are on the major platforms. That's how we consume our media. um but some people, they make the choice to do otherwise. And I mean, enough people have made that choice to where like now, like the Joe Rogan podcast is the most watched show on the planet. And
right.
like that's not nothing. That's people making an active choice to be like, no, I want to sit here and listen to this for 2-3 hours and actually give it my full attention and not have to deal with slop.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I would push back a little that listening to Joe Rogan, or no offense to Joe Rogan, but shoot the shit and smoke pot and kind of just go down rabbit holes is different than sitting with a book for 3 hours and reading adult fiction, not not
Hmm.
not young adult, but like an actual. I think there is still a loss in some of the kind of just sitting and working through things. I mean, I think there's a reason that you know Joe Rogan and Smart Listen. If you look at the top podcasts, they're all kind of they're popcorn podcasts, right? There's nothing wrong with them, and they do pull out ideas, but they're very easy listening. You can do it while you're washing the dishes, and you don't have to really break too much down.
Oh, certainly, yeah, yeah. No, that's a good chunk of the content out there too, because it's like I mean, how Jesus Christ, how many podcasts can you have just where it's the same point made about comedy every single time? Like I can't stand I can't stand those episodes, and the only reason I can't stand it is because like I'm not of that world. I don't go to comedy
Right.
clubs. I'm not a comedian, but to somebody that's actually in there, I'm sure that's interesting to listen to. But Yeah, I mean, and in the same vein, there's people that, like, whether it's Joe Rogan or what have you, like, they'll actually have intellectuals on to talk about these ideas, and most of the time, like, the person
Yeah.
interviewing them has no clue about the topic, which is great because that's most people approaching the subject, so they also, like, get to be like, oh, I wonder, like, I have this stupid, silly question. I hope they answer it, or I hope they ask it. And then they do, and you're like, oh, okay, all right. I understand. This is this is breaking down a very complicated concept and like simple understand terms. And instead of having to sit there and read texts and do all the studies and get this bachelor's or what have you, now I actually have an understanding of like this this idea of quantum physics or black holes or what have you.
Right. Yeah, I think there's something to that where the journalist or whatever you want to call it isn't you know putting too much of his or her opinion and bias into it. I think the risk on the other side is sometimes Rogan, whoever you can get someone on especially in the conspiracy theory vein, and you're not trying to do he's just an entertainer, right? But if he doesn't have the info to push back when someone says something legitimately batshit crazy or possibly harmful, and his counter, which is the same counter that Jon Stewart had on the left, is, hey, I'm just a comedian, that's not my job. But if that's where everyone's getting their info, and people are just questioning things and there's no kind of objective truth, I do worry slightly about that, I guess.
Yeah, that's certainly a valid concern. And I've heard it brought up many times, and I lean on the side of like, well, look, you're not going to get the full picture from a 3-hour conversation, like regardless of what topic, regardless of how simple it is or
Right.
complicated or what have you. You're not going to get the full picture, and I think it's on the individual that is consuming that media to like go out and find that information. Like I've heard like there's all these stories that are written about, oh my god, this person had this person on the podcast and they said this was wrong and that was wrong and all that. It's like, okay, but the idea of the truth, if there is a universal truth about anything, it's always
Right.
negotiation. It's never static. Things that we have believed for so long get upended, just about every single day. Oh, a new scientific
Yep.
discovery finds that the food group or the food pyramid is actually needs to be upside down, or this needs to be changed, or what have
Yeah.
you. I mean, there
All
was
that pasta may not be great.
yeah, or like there was that one infamous scandal, I think about like 5 years ago or so, where like a good chunk of the research that was being used to find cures for Alzheimer's for decades was actually based on fraudulent data, and that happens every single day. We discover a new species, or we have a different understanding of the mind. I mean, recently I heard, and I don't know to what extent this is true, but I heard of this idea of depression being a chemical imbalance within your brain, especially relating to serotonin, was actually not true, because they did this study where they analyzed the brains of depressed people, and they found that they didn't actually have a chemical imbalance, and that the idea of depression was actually much more complicated and nuanced than just simply not having enough of chemical A or too much of chemical B or what have you. That
Yeah.
there's actually a lot more to the picture that we are not seeing. And at that point, it's like, well, do we get mad at the people that said it was a chemical imbalance, or do we get mad at the people that discovered this, or maybe they're wrong? Like, what are their interests? Are they backed up by anyone? It's a
Right.
negotiation. It's a constant negotiation. Things get upended every single day, and we just have to do our best. And there's not any one body or any one person that holds the quote unquote the truth, and
Right.
it's just
And
something that we kind of agree on as a society.
right. And that's the great thing about a free society is, even though if I disagree with podcaster A or B, they definitely should be able to say it. They should be able to monetize it, as long as
Hmm.
they're not, trying to objectively, harm someone or call for violence. Like, the great thing about a free exchange of ideas is people can say whatever they want, and people can listen or not listen, and you can make money off it. Advertisers can boycott you if they want, because it's their money, or they can pay you money. Like, it's like you said, it's so hard to define the objective truth that you get into a kind of a real slippery slope towards a kind of a authoritarian state once you start trying to police what you want people to say and what they should consume.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And so that's why whenever I see these articles like talking about like Joe Rogan or any other like famous podcaster, like, oh, they spread this misinformation, they did this, they did that. It's like, okay, how's about we look at the corporate media's track record? Like, you guys have lied or obfuscated facts about plenty of stories, and it doesn't even matter which side of the political aisle you're on. Both sides have done it, whether it's the Fox News or the CNN or what have you.
Right.
Like, these people they're not infallible either. They got editors, they have incentives with advertiser investments and all these other different interests playing around it. And to like create this like fiction that we have to be really concerned about these podcasters. It's like, no, you're concerned about because the market incentives are not aligned with your model of transmitting information, and now you guys are the ones that are getting the cold shoulder from the public. Like, that's why you're pissed off. It's not because these people have, I don't know, a harebrained idea every once in a while, or they want to talk about the JFK assassination or the Epstein files, or you think that there's some like Jewish conspiracy or whatever. Like, that doesn't, to me, that's not relevant. It's like, no, you can't say that a medium is like automatically, oh, they're less trustworthy. And it's like, well, let's look at your track record too. Like, you guys aren't exactly infallible either. You're just people too, just like us.
Yeah, I think the last couple. I mean, not to get too deep into politics, but the last couple election cycles, you've seen that because the Democrats had a purity test and didn't want to platform certain people, they're not able to. The old model of just waiting for the last 2 weeks and blitzkrieging tons of ads on your over the air local news channels during the commercials, and that's just not getting to people. So you lose a lot, both with candidates that aren't able to shoot the shit for 3 hours because they're afraid of offending one of the parts of their coalition, or just because they you don't fit in this box. But I mean, if you look at, whether it's people on the right or Modani out in the New York mayoral election, you see more and more there's just this attention economy, and people's attention right now isn't on these local, like the news or advertisements. It's all online and on these, like you said, these podcasts or TikTok or whatever, and it's kind of really I think has a chance of kind of revolutionizing who candidates are and where they need to go to reach their constituents.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm it's one of the things that makes me really optimistic going into the future is seeing the real-time breakdown of whether it's the political process or the media conglomerates, all these major institutions that have existed as monoliths for so long are now getting upended with people sitting in basements with webcams. It brings me nothing but
Right.
endless joy to see these people get so frustrated at that and lose market share value because it democratizes the entire process of whether it's the creation or the consumption of media. And right now, like, we're still beholden to major platforms like YouTube and Instagram, Twitter, and whatnot. Like, yeah, you can say just about anything, but there's some things that they will still flag you on or outright ban you on, especially when it comes to any like kind of political crises or public health crises like we had with COVID. They still hold the reins to an extent, but I think that eventually people are going to get so fed up and frustrated with their standards that they're going to be like, okay, well, we're just going to go over here and create our own platform because AI allows us to write the code at lightning speeds, and we no longer have to rely on the terms of service or conditions that you force down our throats. Like, right now, it's just, okay, well, yeah, we're using them just because like there's no real bigger platforms than YouTube, Twitter, and all that. But eventually, even that is going to be gone by the wayside. Even these platforms will no longer hold the same kind of cultural relevance as they do now, and I think it's only a matter of time before that happens.
I mean, I thought that was the general promise of the Fediverse or whatever with Blue Sky and Farcaster and all that it's decentralized and no one owns it. But you know, it's still just the problem of getting that. You got to get the critical mass of people moving, and I don't know, my current hypothesis is that we're just going to get more and more fractionalized. We're like X, Twitter used to be, it really was the public town square, everyone was there, and there's still some of that, but you know, you've got people that went to Threads because they don't like Elon or other people getting back on the platform. You've got people that did move to Blue Sky. You've got people on Truth Social. I think we're kind of getting more and more fractionalized as a society, and everyone just, they want to hear people like them for good or bad, and there's less of this kind of discourse, which a lot of the discourse was toxic, but maybe it's we lose something by not having those voices there.
Yeah, and I've even heard that there's some people considering making apps where it's no longer about having a feed, but your actual interaction with any like anything that's posted on the platform, it actually comes from the group chat. So that you'll join a group chat with people that will take, you know, whether it's Instagram Reels or YouTube videos or Twitter posts, and they will send them there. So that then you're not relying on an algorithm that is, you know, built by people that you'll never meet, you know, specifically targeted to extract the most amount of attention from you for, you know, every second that you're on the platform. But now it's actually like, okay, well, how's about we get individual people to curate that, and how's about we give them a space where now like you can just have that, because right now there's not really much in the way of cross-platform curation. You know, like I'll have
Right.
an Instagram group chat with the boys, I'll have the Twitter chat with, you know, some artists, but there's not like there's nothing that really intersects it. And I think the future, or at least part of the future, platforms that we will see emerge will be people that can actually go cross-platform and have one place where they can, you know, just put all that together. Um,
Yeah.
there's one platform called Token TV, which is, it's like an anti-slop YouTube where essentially um, people got, the developer of it got tired of seeing all this, you know, algorithm, Jake Paul, you know, all this Coco Melon stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
So he's like, all right, screw this, I'm going to create my own platform where people are incentivized to post the most interesting and creative YouTube videos that are hard to find, that may not have all the views, but the content in them is still worth watching. And so you can make a submission once a day. You have 3 tokens that you're given every day, so you can actually vote on the kind of stuff that you like. And as a result, it becomes this curated feed of whether it's business and finance or creative arts or political news and gaming, and, you know, all these different categories they set up here, that you can actually
Interesting.
curate. So now it's the value from it comes from people going out of their way to be like, okay, I want my stuff to be featured on the front page, I want my suggestion to be featured, and I got to go out and find the most interesting video from unknown creators or lesser known creators that will actually allow me to do
Right.
that.
And I guess it's kind of like a micro Reddit, right? But you have the limited tokens, means you have less bots being able to push things because they can't just have a sea of them upvoting 1,000 things. Kind of the I guess that the idea is in being able to restrict people to 3, you're kind of distilling it down to hopefully the best works.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that the platform has that many people. So right now, like it's still in its infancy. I think it's only been around for about a year or so. But like this is a direct response to the frustration that people had to using YouTube. And I think the act of curation, and even linking back to the idea that we were talking about before about, you know, this is the age of the ideas guy, of someone that is able to curate taste, that's going to become a lot more important, because, you know, the cost of generating and the cost of all these links and whatnot is so low that we just get this sea of slop. But every now and then there's something there that we can find that actually does touch upon something that we want to share with others.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I probably got to jump off in the next 5 or so. I've got another meeting coming up. Is there any kind of last things you wanted to cover, or this has been great?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, we can certainly end it off here. I don't really have any I mean, the only question I do have, I think it would take longer than 5 minutes to answer. It was just more about how you arrived at your style and what is it that you actually think of when you work on generating these pictures. If that's something you can sum up in 5 minutes, then by all means, yeah.
Yeah, it'll keep me from blathering. So I've kind of gone through different styles. I'd say for the last 2 years, kind of the common thread has been kind of this kind of suburbia adjacent, somewhere in the past. They tend to be kind of this kind of Leave It to Beaver, white waspy type people, because in the beginning these models, that's all they were outputting is like, if you type in the prompt housewife, 100 out of 100 times it's going to be a white woman with a permed hair, and like there's these kind of, I don't know, very culturally baked in, for good or bad, probably bad, into the system, where it's like it's like a Mad Men advertisement. But kind of playing around with taking this perfect facade and then finding some way to break it. So with soft collapse, it was kind of the idea that, going back to philosophy, that you have what seems like these perfect worlds, but there's probably the best. Yeah, that'll show it. The best way to view that is on probably Verse. Verse.works has I can send you a link in the Discord. They plug for Verse. They have the best visual displays for. All right, hold on. Here we go. Send it to you. Yeah. So, oops. Yeah. So the idea is kind of taking this world that's breaking down around everyone, and people just don't pay attention. They go about their day. They mow their yard. They're worried about keeping up with the Joneses. So whether it's representing current political issues or the fears of AI or whatever it is, the idea, like, sometimes there's so much noise and bad bad news surrounding us that people's only option is to kind of to shut it out, to put your head in the sand, to just keep going on, because you're flooded with this, every day there's a crisis, and at a certain point you just get burnt out and decide that you can't make a difference, so you just look on Amazon for the next upgraded pressure cooker. So that's kind of the general thing. And then on the kind of the new glitchy stuff, I wanted to kind of just branch off of that. And so the current thought was, if that was people's kind of apathy and everything breaking down, and they're the new kind of residuals, is kind of more the opposite of, what if one person, what if you see kind of this breakdown around you, and it's all hitting you, and how do you function while still, so there's lots of kind of like paranoia and people running and trying to escape things, and like how is, there's kind of the idea that neither one is probably a really healthy solution, trying to fully wrestle with everything or just ignoring it. So that's kind of a very, very, very broad sweep of it.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that is certainly a dynamic that you see now. It's like, how can you even begin to navigate such a world where you're getting more information in the first hour of waking up than a villager did in a lifetime of what's happening in the world around them in that time. Like how do you circle that square? And it's like, well, yeah, Netflix and drugs and consumerism is certainly a great way of going about it.
I think exactly from an evolutionary perspective, like you said, like we're used to be these kind of small tribal communities, right? And you have empathy. You're wired to have strong empathy for when something happens in your tribe, right? Someone breaks a leg, someone loses a child. Like we're wired to care about that, but we're not wired to be like on the other side of the globe. 10,000 people just died in an earthquake, right? And you see it on your phone when you wake up. Now, I still think arguably but information is good to have, but from a mental perspective, that's just it's not a way our brains are really meant to set up. And when you see that all the time, then you risk also losing that connection to those around you because you're just so saturated with pain.
Yeah, once again, curation seems to be one of the chief ways of being able to combat this and still stay sane. I mean, it's the same thing of like when people they move from small towns to a big city, they experience this effect where they'll just happen upon a busy street and they see all this homeless and their heart goes out to them and they're like, oh my god, like this is so cruel. How could everyone just be so apathetic? Well, spend enough time in a big city and eventually you see enough homeless where you're like, okay, well, look, I either go up
Right.
to every single one of these people and offer them help, or I just simply put on the horse blinders and move on, because otherwise I would never you can't exist in that environment if you're just trying to give a piece of yourself away
Right.
to every single person that's in trouble. And like, what is that?
Or pragmatically, that giving that money to a respected nonprofit in the area is going to go a lot further than the one aggressive panhandler who's hitting you up. There's lots of things that don't feel good at the at the time it's happening, but are the better for the overall welfare.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of intersection to find yourself at. But yeah, no, it certainly comes through in your work, and I appreciate you making the time to come on the show today. I really enjoyed the conversation there, especially the copyright. I don't really have a lot of insight on that. I'm not really in touch with people in that side of the industry, but it was good to hear from someone that is at least slightly touched upon these things.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I had a really good time. I appreciate it.
Right on. So in terms of your socials, all your tags, and everyone can find you at on Twitter at Nomads Vagabonds. Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Beautiful. So yeah, guys, check him out. Buy one of his pieces if you can. These are easily one of the more like creative AI gens that I've come across. And yeah, thank you again for making the time to come on today. It was a pleasure.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, take care, guys. We'll see you later.
All right, bye.